Hello. So, in this video, we're going to talk about Joel Schumacher's film Batman Forever, the third of the sort of classic 80s and 90s Batman films. I'll say big drop off between Batman Returns and Batman Forever in terms of quality. I actually think of the four 80s and 90s films, this is the weakest. And I know that's kind of an uncommon opinion because most people think that Batman and Robin is the weakest. In my video about that, I will make the argument that many of you will probably not find convincing that actually that's a better film than Batman Forever. So, also, incidentally, I think I had said in my videos about Batman and Batman Returns that the first three were directed by Tim Burton. Turns out I was wrong. It happens sometimes. This film was directed by Joel Schumacher. It was produced by Tim Burton, though, so Burton was still involved. But the aesthetics are definitely different. There's still some of that sort of dark, almost German expressionist inflected elements from Batman and Batman Returns, the two Tim Burton directed films, but things get a lot brighter, a lot more cartoony in almost cartoony in a Looney Tunes type way, which I actually find really, really unpleasant in this film. Jim Carrey plays the Riddler, and so Jim Carrey does the kind of stuff that Jim Carrey does. Like, he is who he is as an actor. And yes, I know he later in his career played more serious, dramatic roles and whatnot, but in the 90s, he was the Ace Ventura, The Mask type actor, and he just excessively physical, sort of ridiculous comedy cartooniness. And in a way that makes sense for the Riddler, but I don't think it's a good presentation. Then Tommy Lee Jones plays Two-Face. And I don't know, I mean, he's okay, but I feel like Tommy Lee Jones is not a natural fit for that sort of Looney Tunes cartoonishness that Schumacher tried to bring to this film. So, for me, I like Tommy Lee Jones as an actor. I don't think this was a good role for him. You also have Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne / Batman. I think he's fine. A lot of people didn't like Val Kilmer's performance. I think it's okay. But I also generally don't find Bruce Wayne or Batman that interesting a character. For me, the whole Batman franchise is about the villains. You also have Chris O'Donnell, who plays Dick Grayson, who becomes Robin. And then you have Dr. Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman, who is possibly the worst psychiatrist ever, because she basically is there to just sort of be like, oh, Batman / Bruce Wayne, you're so sexy, I want to have sex with you. I will give cursory psychological analyses of things based on really not enough information. But mainly she's just there to sort of be horny. That's really her function in the movie. And then later in the film to get captured by Two-Face and the Riddler, and then be a sort of damsel in distress in a classic, you can either save Robin or you can save this woman scenario. Which, of course, Batman defeats fairly easily. So, no huge payoff there. Okay, so I guess to sort of slightly cycle back to Val Kilmer, part of the reason that people, I think, don't like the Val Kilmer element is he seems less troubled and conflicted than Michael Keaton in the previous films. And that's a fair cop. Like, I get that critique. But again, I don't find Batman a super interesting character in and of himself, necessarily, so much as the villains. So, one of the things that I talked about in the previous videos about Batman and Batman Returns is the obsession with origins, the obsession with the genesis of these figures, and that is 100% true here as well. We are reminded of Batman's origin story, how young Bruce Wayne sees his parents murdered in front of him. Again, we get this iconic scene where the pearls of his mother's broken necklace clatter to the ground. We get this sort of additional element where young Bruce Wayne is running through the grounds and he falls into this cave and he sees this bat that terrifies him, and that becomes the genesis of Batman as such. Yeah. I mean, it's a more minor element of the movie, but they still feel the need to incorporate it. We learn parenthetically that Harvey Dent had been Gotham's DA, and then he was horribly scarred with acid by a mob boss, and that psychologically broke him, and so he becomes Two-Face. But realistically, Two-Face is the sub-villain. The main villain of the film is Riddler, and we get Riddler's origin story. He had been Edward Nygma, who worked for Wayne Industries in research and development. He had this obsessive, kind of parasocial relationship with Bruce Wayne, and when Wayne refuses to sign off on his experiment about manipulating brainwaves and sort of beaming televised images directly into people's brains, Nygma snaps, and he becomes the Riddler. He uses his machine without having gone through proper testing and realizes that he can draw people's brainwaves and become smarter by sucking up their neural activity or something. The science is not well explained here, and as a non-science person, I probably wouldn't understand it anyway. But so we get the origin story of the Riddler. He also becomes obsessed with destroying Bruce Wayne, Batman, because he had been obsessed with Bruce Wayne before. We also have the origin story of Robin. He was one of the Flying Graysons. They attempt to stop a robbery by Two-Face at the circus, and all of his family members are killed in that attempt except him, and then he is sort of brought back to Bruce Wayne's house because Bruce sees his own experience having had his family murdered. And so Dick Grayson, who strangely enough is like completely an adult, like Chris O'Donnell is clearly of age, and yet there's like talk of putting him in the foster system or something. Like, I don't know how old Chris O'Donnell was in 1995. I think this film comes out. But I would be very, very hard-pressed to believe he was under 18, and particularly to believe he was under 16. But he discovers the Batcave And basically, Alfred's like, yeah, man, why don't you just be Batman's sidekick? It's like whatevs. And Bruce Wayne slash Batman is like, no, I don't need a sidekick. I don't want you to do this. It's dangerous. And Dick and Alfred are basically just like, yeah, but we're doing it anyway. So, again, this fascination with origin stories. And in a way, I kind of get it if you sort of imagine that this is a movie franchise that's going to carry on, and you want to establish why these villains are the way they are so that you can then just have them be villains in subsequent films. But that really never happens. I mean, we come back with the Christopher Nolan films in the 2000s, and we have the Joker again, for instance, but this Joker has nothing to do with Jack Nicholson's Joker from the Tim Burton Batman film. It just the whole let's establish Jack Napier as a gangster who gets dumped into some chemicals thing, that's completely gone the next time we see Joker in a major Batman film. Like, they even say in the Christopher Nolan film, we have no idea who the Joker is, where he came from, why he's doing what he's doing. He's just this chaotic, anarchic, violent force who happens to be really, really good at mayhem and destruction. So it's clearly not like, oh, this was Jack Napier who got dumped into a thing. Though even then, even in the Christopher Nolan film, the Joker is sort of fascinated with his own origin, which he revamps multiple times. But anyway, so in this film, Batman Forever, it is again this fascination with origin stories to the point that, like, apart from hench people, there just aren't any villains, aren't any major villains. I guess Boss Grisham. But we don't have any villain who is just there, just doing stuff. Everything has to be about origins. And that ends up becoming sort of the dominant theme. And I'm not 100% sure why that ends up becoming the dominant theme. But I think this is ultimately a film where the acting is not great. The script is not great. The visuals are pretty good for the mid-90s. There's a lot of like CGI. There's a lot of like interesting sort of early digital imagery, stuff like that. But I think of them, I find these villains the least interesting. I find Jim Carrey's sort of over-the-top excessiveness not especially persuasive in a villain. Like, I get that the character is insane, fine, but it's just, I don't know. It doesn't work for me. For me, this is the worst of the Batman films of the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher, Christopher Nolan segment, which are the ones I'm really familiar with. I actually think this doesn't even have the redeeming badness of Batman and Robin, which is generally regarded as the worst of the films. For me, it's this one, Batman Forever.